In today's episode, we're diving into the most stupid ways Karens died. In today's video, from a wedding photographer who fell to her death chasing the perfect shot, to a storm chaser who live-streamed his final moments driving into an EF5 tornado. It was October 31st, 2017, and the abandoned Bethlehem steel plant loomed against the Pennsylvania sky like a monument to industrial decay. Marcus Chen adjusted his helmet camera as he approached the massive facility, its rusted structures and broken windows creating the perfect Halloween atmosphere for his urban exploration blog. The plant had been closed for decades, leaving behind a maze of unstable buildings, toxic chemical tanks, and deep industrial pits that made it one of the most dangerous abandoned sites in America. Marcus had built his following by documenting the decay of America's Rust Belt, specializing in abandoned industrial sites that other explorers avoided due to safety concerns. At 26, he had explored over 100 abandoned locations, each more dangerous than the last, as he sought unique content for his popular blog. His followers craved the thrill of vicarious danger, and Marcus delivered by venturing into places where few dared to tread. The steel plant had been on Marcus's exploration list for months, requiring extensive research into its layout and potential hazards. He had studied old blueprints and safety reports, but nothing could have prepared him for the extent of deterioration that decades of abandonment had caused. His decision to explore alone on Halloween night was driven by his belief that the spooky atmosphere would create compelling content for his upcoming blog post. Marcus's urban exploration career had started innocently enough, with abandoned houses and empty shopping malls, but his audience demanded increasingly dangerous content as his following grew. His girlfriend had broken up with him 3 months earlier, citing his obsession with dangerous locations and his refusal to consider her safety concerns. She had begged him to stick to safer abandoned buildings, but Marcus was convinced that extreme content was the only way to stand out in the crowded urban exploration community. His blog had generated enough income to quit his day job as a graphic designer, but the pressure to maintain his audience meant constantly escalating the danger level of his explorations. Marcus had been hospitalized twice in the past year, once for a tetanus infection from rusty metal, and another time for chemical burns from an abandoned factory's residual toxins. Each incident only seemed to fuel his determination to push further into places that rational people avoided. The Bethlehem steel plant represented the ultimate challenge for Marcus's Halloween special, a location so dangerous that even veteran urban explorers had warned him against attempting it. His research had revealed that the plant contained numerous chemical storage tanks, unstable structures, and deep industrial pits filled with decades of toxic waste. But Marcus saw these hazards as features rather than bugs, believing that the extreme danger would translate into viral content that would cement his reputation in the urban exploration community. His equipment setup included multiple cameras positioned throughout his gear, emergency flares, and a satellite communicator that he rarely used because it interfered with the authentic experience his audience expected. Marcus had dismissed suggestions from other explorers to bring a partner, convinced that solo exploration created more compelling content and allowed him to take risks that safety-conscious companions might prevent. Marcus's headlamp illuminated rusted machinery and chemical tanks as he descended into the plant's basement levels, narrating his exploration for his future audience. His chest-mounted backup camera captured him following what appeared to be a maintenance tunnel, stepping confidently onto a metal grating that looked solid but had been weakened by years of corrosion and chemical exposure. The grating's support beams had been eaten away by decades of acid rain and chemical runoff, creating a death trap that appeared deceptively stable to the untrained eye. Marcus moved steadily across the grating, his headlamp casting shaky light over the tunnel floor. A sudden, sharp crack echoed through the metal beneath him, stopping him mid-step. Before he could react or shift his weight back, the weakened support beams tore loose with a shriek, and the entire section dropped away beneath his feet. His chest camera caught the sudden jolt as the floor vanished, a flash of his hands shooting out instinctively toward the collapsing edges, the headlamp beam whipping wildly across the tunnel walls, and the sickening rush of air as he plunged nearly 60 feet into the darkness below. Marcus's body wasn't discovered for 3 weeks, when other urban explorers found his equipment near the collapsed grating. The chest camera's memory card, protected by a waterproof housing, revealed his final moments and helped investigators understand the accident, while the toxic chemicals in the tank required a hazmat team for body recovery. His death led to increased security at abandoned industrial sites, while his final video became a training tool for urban exploration safety courses, serving as a permanent reminder of the deadly risks hidden in America's abandoned places. It was March 22, 2016, and the dinner rush at Olive Garden in Fresno, California, was in full swing as servers weaved between tables carrying steaming plates of pasta and breadsticks. The restaurant's warm lighting created a cozy atmosphere, while the sounds of clinking silverware and conversation filled the 200-seat dining room. The kitchen operated at peak efficiency, with line cooks coordinating their movements in the choreographed dance of professional food service. Susan Martinez sat at table 47, her notebook open and pen poised as she documented every perceived violation of health codes and service standards. At 38, the insurance claims adjuster had transformed dining out into a full-time investigation, carrying sanitizing wipes, a digital thermometer, and a magnifying glass to examine food preparation from her table. Her purse contained printed copies of health department regulations and business cards identifying her as a concerned citizen advocate. Susan had been banned from 4 restaurants in the past 6 months for disruptive behavior, including climbing over a counter at Applebee's to inspect their ice machine and demanding to see food storage temperatures at Denny's. She maintained a detailed spreadsheet of violations and had filed 17 complaints with the health department, though none had resulted in citations. Tonight's visit to Olive Garden was part of her systematic campaign to clean up Fresno's restaurant industry. When Susan observed a server briefly touch the rim of a plate while delivering salad, she immediately demanded to speak with the manager. Her voice carried across the dining room as she accused the staff of flagrant health code violations and threatened to shut down the restaurant with a single phone call. The manager, trained in de-escalation techniques, politely explained their sanitation procedures while offering to comp her meal. Susan's demands escalated as she insisted on conducting her own kitchen inspection, claiming she had authority as a tax-paying citizen to ensure public safety. When the manager refused her entry to the restricted kitchen area, Susan announced she would find her own way in, to gather evidence of the violations she was certain existed. During a shift change, Susan slipped through the employee entrance and into the bustling kitchen, her phone camera ready to document what she expected to be shocking health violations. She climbed onto a stainless steel prep counter to photograph what she believed were code violations in the ceiling ventilation system. As she stretched for a better camera angle, her shoes slid on the freshly sanitized surface, and she lost her footing, tumbling off the counter. She twisted in midair and landed face first in an industrial deep fryer that had been left open during a routine oil filter change. Scalding 350-degree oil covered her upper body as she screamed in agony, the sound echoing through the kitchen while staff rushed to pull her out. The burns covered more than 60% of her body, and the superheated vapors severely damaged her airways. Paramedics arrived within 6 minutes, but Susan's injuries were beyond treatment. She died at Community Regional Medical Center 3 hours later, her phone containing dozens of photos of normal kitchen operations that she had misinterpreted as violations. The restaurant was temporarily closed during the investigation, which concluded that Susan had illegally entered a restricted area and caused her own death through reckless behavior. It was June 18, 2016, when a young woman's need to prove herself in a male-dominated world would lead to a fatal miscalculation on the streets of Detroit. Tiffany Greer, 29, an experienced auto mechanic who had spent 5 years working in a garage repair shop, had earned respect for her technical skills, but constantly felt the need to demonstrate her fearlessness in Detroit's underground street racing scene. Tiffany's aggressive and overconfident personality made her a standout figure among the predominantly male racers who gathered in the abandoned warehouse district every weekend. Her petite frame belied her fierce determination to outperform anyone who questioned her abilities behind the wheel. She had invested months of her salary and countless hours modifying her 1995 Honda Civic, installing a turbocharged engine that produced nearly 3 times the horsepower the compact car was originally designed to handle. The warehouse district had become Detroit's premier illegal racing destination due to its long, straight roads and minimal police presence. However, the area was notorious for poor road conditions, oil stains from industrial trucks, and dangerous intersections that had claimed several vehicles over the years. Despite these hazards, racers continued to gather there because of the quarter-mile stretch of relatively straight asphalt. Tiffany arrived that Saturday night with her heavily modified Civic, the engine bay packed with aftermarket parts that transformed the economy car into a potential death trap. Her dismissive attitude toward safety equipment was well known among the racing community. She openly mocked other racers who wore helmets or installed roll cages, viewing such precautions as signs of weakness rather than wisdom. The car's original safety systems had never been upgraded to handle the massive power increase. Her worn tires, which she had been meaning to replace for months, showed dangerous levels of tread wear that would prove catastrophic under high-stress conditions. Fellow racers had warned her about the combination of excessive power and inadequate safety equipment, but Tiffany's stubborn personality made her dismiss their concerns as jealousy. At 11:30 p.m., Tiffany lined up for what would become her final race. The quarter-mile drag race against another modified vehicle drew spectators who gathered along the sides of the industrial road to witness the competition. She revved her engine aggressively, the turbocharged motor producing an intimidating roar that masked the inherent instability of her setup. When the unofficial starter dropped his hand, Tiffany launched her car at maximum acceleration. The excessive horsepower immediately overwhelmed her worn rear tires, which lost traction on the oil-stained asphalt surface. The car began sliding sideways at approximately 60 miles per hour, completely beyond her control despite her mechanical expertise. The Honda spun violently across the road before slamming sideways into a concrete loading dock with devastating force. The impact compressed the entire driver's side of the vehicle by nearly 2 feet, crushing the door frame and window directly into Tiffany's body. Her ribcage, left arm, and pelvis were crushed instantly, while she became trapped inside the mangled wreckage. Spectators rushed to help, but found Tiffany unconscious and bleeding heavily from massive internal injuries. The steering wheel had been driven into her chest, while the roof had collapsed down to shoulder level, creating a horrific scene that would haunt witnesses for years. Emergency responders arrived within 8 minutes, but required specialized extraction equipment to remove Tiffany from the crushed vehicle. The process took an additional 25 minutes, but she was pronounced dead at the scene from massive internal trauma, multiple organ failure, and severe blood loss. Investigation revealed the tragic irony that Tiffany's mechanical skills had created the very weapon that killed her, while her dismissal of basic safety equipment had sealed her fate. It was December 15th, 2013, and the Best Buy electronics store in Atlanta hummed with pre-holiday shopping activity as customers browsed the latest gadgets and televisions. The 45,000 square foot showroom displayed wall-mounted TVs of every size, while sales associates helped families choose entertainment systems for their holiday celebrations. The customer service desk already showed signs of holiday stress, with returns and exchanges creating longer than usual wait times. Carol Johnson wheeled a massive box containing a 65-inch LED television toward the returns counter, her face set in the determined expression that Best Buy employees had learned to dread. At 44, the retail manager had ironically become the store's most notorious customer, exploiting return policies with the precision of a legal scholar and the persistence of a debt collector. Her home office contained detailed spreadsheets tracking return periods, warranty terms, and manager contact information for every major retailer in Atlanta. Carol had been returning the same model television to Best Buy every few months for over 2 years, claiming various defects to secure full refunds before purchasing identical replacement units. Store employees recognized her elaborate scheme, but were required to process returns that technically met policy requirements, despite their suspicions about her fraudulent activities. Her pattern had cost the store thousands in restocking fees and damaged merchandise write-offs. She had perfected her performance over dozens of returns, memorizing corporate policy language and practicing her outraged customer routine in front of her bathroom mirror. Carol's neighbors had grown suspicious of the constant delivery trucks arriving at her house, followed by her mysterious trips to various electronics stores with identical boxes. The electronics manager, familiar with Carol's history, requested additional documentation for her 6th TV return of the year. Carol's voice rose to a volume that attracted attention throughout the electronics department as she accused the staff of discrimination and threatened to post negative reviews across every social media platform and review website. Her face flushed red as she pulled out her phone, waving it menacingly while reciting corporate policy numbers she had memorized specifically for these confrontations. Carol grabbed the 80-pound TV box to demonstrate the obvious defects she claimed had appeared, dragging the heavy package onto the counter with effort. Fueled by anger, She tried to lift the front end of the box high enough to show the damage to the manager. Her arms shook violently under the weight, the cardboard flexing as she struggled to keep her grip. Mid-rant, her sweaty hands slipped. The 80-pound box toppled forward off the counter, striking her shoulder and forcing her violently off balance. Carol stumbled backward and lost her footing on the tile floor, falling hard and striking the back of her head. The combined impact of the box and her fall caused a loud, sickening crack that echoed through the electronics department. She lay motionless, her arms twitching. The fall had fractured her cervical vertebrae and severely damaged her spinal cord, leaving her unable to breathe on her own. Employees rushed to lift the box off her and called 911, but Carol went into cardiac arrest minutes later and was pronounced dead shortly after paramedics arrived. Investigation revealed her extensive return fraud scheme, with records showing she had illegally returned over $30,000 in merchandise across multiple stores using fabricated defect claims. Best Buy implemented new return tracking systems and policies to prevent similar fraud schemes, while Carol's death was ruled accidental despite her criminal activities. The incident became a training case for retail workers about the importance of following return policies while maintaining safety protocols, and her estate faced criminal charges for the fraudulent return scheme that had consumed her final years. It was March 8, 2017, in Dallas, Texas. The dinner rush had just begun at a mid-range steakhouse, where the clatter of dishes and chatter of customers blended into routine noise. The atmosphere seemed unremarkable, yet within an hour, an accident would unfold, one that left bystanders shaken, but not altogether shocked, given the reputation of the woman involved. Barbara Ellis was 46 years old and well known in that establishment for her behavior. She worked a low-level office job nearby, but her self-image was that of someone who deserved more recognition than she ever received. Dining out had become her stage, and she frequently berated servers to reassert control. Her family mentioned that she once humiliated a young waiter to the point of tears over a glass of iced tea she claimed had too much ice. The restaurant environment itself was straightforward. Commercial kitchens are tightly organized spaces with slick tile floors, hot surfaces, and fryers filled with oil heated to nearly 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Staff are trained to move in coordinated patterns to avoid collisions. Customers are barred from entering these areas, not only because of food safety, but because a single slip or misstep can cause serious injury. That evening, she had been seated for less than 15 minutes when her agitation began. She complained loudly about the pace of service, despite her order being taken within standard time. When her drink refill did not arrive instantly, she pushed her chair back with a loud scrape and began yelling at the nearest server. Staff tried to calm her, assuring her that food was being prepared, but she continued shouting, waving her arms. Several diners turned in their seats to watch. Her outburst escalated when she stood and marched toward the service counter, pushing past a young hostess who told her firmly that customers were not allowed behind it. Barbara sneered and stepped through the swing door into the kitchen, declaring she would get it herself. Employees shouted for her to stop, but she advanced further. The kitchen had just been mopped in one area to clear up spilled water near the fry station. Staff knew it was slick, but Barbara moved forward with no caution. Within seconds, the predictable happened. Her heel slid on the wet patch, and her body whipped backward before snapping forward. She struck her temple on the sharp edge of a stainless steel counter with an audible crack that several witnesses later described. She collapsed sideways, her upper body striking the fryer station. A burst of superheated oil splashed out, searing her face, neck, and shoulders. The burns were immediate and severe. Kitchen staff reacted instantly, pulling her away and shutting down equipment, but she was already unresponsive. Customers in the dining room saw the commotion and the smoke of splattered oil rising. Emergency services were called, arriving within minutes. Paramedics attempted resuscitation, but she was gravely injured from both head trauma and extensive burns. She was transported to a nearby hospital, where doctors worked briefly before declaring her dead. The extent of her injuries left no realistic chance of survival. The aftermath was chaotic. The steakhouse closed for the night, and employees were interviewed by investigators before being sent home in shock. Management later installed additional signage and barriers to the kitchen entrance, citing safety concerns. Local news covered the incident briefly, framing it as a workplace hazard rather than focusing on Barbara herself. Among staff, The story circulated quietly for months, an unsettling reminder that a single act of arrogance had ended in a scene they would not forget. It was August 14, 2016, when two sisters made a decision that would forever change their family's social media obsession. Kendra Lawson, 29, a plus-sized Instagram influencer known throughout Phoenix for her demanding Karen-like behavior and aggressive pursuit of the perfect selfie, had convinced her younger sister Emily, 26, a timid retail worker, to join her on a dangerous photography expedition to the abandoned grain silo in Gary, Indiana. Kendra's narcissistic personality and desperate need for online validation had always overshadowed Emily's gentle nature. The older sister had built her brand around confrontational content and risky photo shoots, often berating store managers while filming for her 5,000 followers. Her entitled attitude extended to her photography, believing that warning signs and safety barriers didn't apply to someone of her social media status. She often wore shirts with bold slogans that matched her outspoken personality. The abandoned Hartwell grain facility had been empty for 8 years, with a 60-foot concrete silo that had developed structural cracks. Kendra had researched the location specifically for its dramatic industrial backdrop, dismissing Emily's concerns about trespassing and safety. She arrived at sunset with professional camera equipment, having cut through chain-link fencing while demanding Emily document her rule-breaking for content. The silo's observation platform, 50 feet above ground, offered the panoramic views Kendra craved for her Instagram feed. Emily pleaded with her sister to stay away from the deteriorated safety railing, but Kendra's aggressive confidence and determination to get the perfect shot overrode any reasonable judgment. She dismissed Emily's concerns with typical Karen entitlement, insisting she deserved the best angles regardless of danger. At 7:45 p.m., Kendra positioned herself sitting on the rusted safety railing with her legs dangling over the edge. Her 280-pound frame put enormous stress on the 40-year-old steel barrier as she leaned backward for dramatic selfie angles. Emily watched in horror as her sister ignored the creaking sounds and visible rust flakes falling from the deteriorating metal. The weakened railing suddenly gave way under Kendra's shifting weight as she leaned back for another pose. Emily screamed as her sister plummeted 50 feet straight down, landing on the concrete silo floor with devastating impact. The fall shattered Kendra's spine, pelvis, and skull upon contact with the unforgiving surface. Her final expression showed complete shock that consequences had finally caught up with her demanding lifestyle. Despite Emily's frantic calls for help, the remote location meant emergency responders took precious time to arrive. Kendra had suffered immediate spinal cord severance and massive head trauma, resulting in instant death from traumatic brain injury and internal bleeding. The woman who had spent years bulldozing through life with entitled aggression now lay broken from her own reckless pursuit of social media fame. Security guards discovered the scene the next morning after Emily's desperate calls to authorities. The final selfie, found on Kendra's phone, showed her smiling on the railing just minutes before the fatal fall, a haunting reminder of how social media obsession had consumed her final moments. Her last post had been captioned with typical Karen arrogance about conquering another forbidden location. This tragic incident forever changed Emily's relationship with social media and serves as a stark reminder that the pursuit of online validation can have deadly consequences when combined with entitled behavior and disregard for safety. The abandoned silo was demolished 6 months later, following Kendra's death. It was March 22, 2019, when a plumber's overconfidence would lead to a fatal encounter with electricity in a suburban Tampa garage. Dustin Crowley, 41, a seasoned plumber with 15 years of experience, had built a reputation for his rugged, no-nonsense approach to home repairs and his dismissive attitude towards safety protocols and building codes. Dustin's straightforward personality had served him well in plumbing, but his growing arrogance about his technical abilities had begun extending into areas where he lacked proper training. He often told customers that real tradesmen didn't need permits or inspections, viewing such requirements as bureaucratic obstacles designed to inflate costs. When homeowner Janet Martinez contacted him about installing a new 240-volt outlet for her electric car charger, Dustin immediately saw an opportunity to expand his services. The job legally required a licensed electrician, but Dustin convinced Janet he could complete the work for half the price of a certified electrical contractor. His plan involved tapping into the existing 240-volt dryer circuit rather than running new wiring. a shortcut that would save time and materials. Dustin had watched several YouTube tutorials the night before and borrowed a basic voltage tester, believing this minimal preparation was sufficient for the electrical work ahead. The garage presented several hazards that a trained electrician would have immediately recognized. The concrete floor was damp from a recent car wash, creating a conductive surface, while the cramped workspace made it difficult to maintain safe distances from live electrical components. Dustin arrived with his standard plumbing tools and the borrowed voltage tester, confident that his mechanical aptitude would translate seamlessly to electrical work. His decision to work on the live circuit stemmed from his desire to avoid resetting the homeowner's digital clocks and electronic devices. At 2:15 p.m., Dustin began working on the live dryer outlet while kneeling on the damp concrete garage floor. He planned to splice into the 240-volt circuit by cutting existing wires and installing a junction box, unaware that this approach violated multiple electrical codes. Using standard wire cutters with non-insulated handles, Dustin attempted to cut through what he believed were de-energized wires. However, he had failed to properly test the circuit, and the wires were still carrying full 240-volt power. The moment his cutters contacted both hot wires simultaneously, they created a direct short circuit that sent deadly electrical current through the metal tool handles. The 240 volts of electricity coursed directly into Dustin's hands and through his body as he knelt on the conductive concrete floor. The electrical current caused his muscles to contract involuntarily, preventing him from releasing the tools that were now conducting lethal voltage through his nervous system and directly to his heart. For approximately 8 seconds, Dustin's body became part of the electrical circuit as the current disrupted his heart's natural rhythm and caused severe burns on his hands. The sustained electrical shock induced immediate cardiac arrhythmia, causing his heart to beat irregularly before stopping entirely as the circuit breaker finally tripped. Janet Martinez discovered Dustin unconscious on her garage floor 10 minutes later. She immediately called 911, but paramedics could not restore a normal heart rhythm despite aggressive resuscitation efforts using advanced cardiac life support protocols. Investigation revealed multiple electrical code violations and determined that proper safety procedures would have prevented the fatal accident entirely. Investigators concluded that basic safety procedures and proper licensing would have prevented the accident. It was May 14, 2018, in Phoenix, Arizona. The heat clung to the pavement outside a suburban grocery store, where shoppers moved quickly to their cars, shielding their eyes from the late afternoon glare. In the loading zone, a scene that started as irritation would escalate into a fatal accident, one that left bystanders shaken but unsurprised given the behavior of the woman at its center. Liz Thompson was 52 years old, known in her neighborhood for her temper and also for her size. At well over 200 pounds, her frame made movements slower and falls harder to recover from. She was not a professional under pressure, nor someone navigating complex risks. Instead, her daily life revolved around small errands, often punctuated by outbursts. Cashiers and clerks knew her as the customer who demanded managers over minor inconveniences. Neighbors avoided her driveway, recalling how she once screamed at a teenager for bagging groceries too slowly. Confrontation had become her identity, and she treated conflict as a way of asserting control. Rules, signs, and courtesies were simply obstacles she refused to acknowledge. The technical setting that day was ordinary, but unforgiving. Grocery store loading zones are designed for trucks to back slowly into designated spaces, guided by mirrors and sometimes spotters. Drivers rely on pedestrians to keep clear of these large vehicles, as blind spots make anything directly behind the truck invisible. Even at low speeds, a semi-trailer weighing several tons cannot stop instantly once rolling. Liz had pulled her SUV into the loading zone, blocking the space reserved for a delivery truck scheduled to arrive. When the driver honked, she refused to move. She stepped out, slamming her cart into the side of the truck while shouting insults. Witnesses later described her as red-faced, gesturing wildly, clearly determined to escalate instead of yielding. The driver, attempting to complete his delivery, inched the truck backward toward the dock. Store employees shouted for Liz to step aside, but she pushed her cart closer to the truck's path, treating the slow roll of the vehicle as another chance to prove a point. By this stage, the danger was obvious. Bystanders waved and called out, but Liz ignored them. She shoved her cart forward, then turned abruptly and caught her foot on the curb. The stumble was small but decisive. Her size made it impossible to recover balance once her weight shifted. She fell heavily onto the asphalt, directly behind the truck's reversing wheels. Her shopping spilled across the pavement as her body slipped into the blind spot. The truck's rear wheels rolled over her before the driver realized anything had happened. Screams erupted from shoppers and several ran forward waving their arms. The driver slammed the brakes, jumping out to see what had occurred. The scene was immediate and gruesome, with no possibility of survival. Emergency responders arrived within minutes, but paramedics could only confirm what was already clear. Liz had been killed instantly by crushing injuries. Surveillance footage reviewed later showed the sequence without ambiguity. Every step, from her blocking the zone, to the cart slamming, to her fall, was documented. Witnesses told investigators that warnings had been shouted repeatedly, but she had chosen to ignore them. The driver, moving cautiously and within regulations, had no way of knowing she had gone to the ground behind him. The Phoenix Police Department cleared the truck driver of all fault. Their report emphasized that the death was entirely preventable and resulted from pedestrian interference in a restricted area. The grocery store later installed additional signage and barriers, though staff admitted the measures were meant more to protect drivers from confrontations than to prevent another accident like Liz Thompson's. It was September 12, 2018, when a marketing executive's obsession with capturing the perfect photograph would lead him into one of nature's most deadly traps. Owen Maddox, 35, a successful marketing director from Chicago, had planned his Yellowstone vacation as an elaborate social media showcase designed to impress his colleagues and prove to his recently divorced ex-wife that he was thriving without her. Owen's competitive and attention-seeking personality had always driven him to one-up others in every aspect of life. His need for validation had intensified following his divorce 6 months earlier, when his ex-wife left him for his narcissistic behavior and constant need to be the center of attention. This Yellowstone trip represented his chance to show the world he was living his best life. He had spent weeks researching the park's most dangerous and restricted areas, specifically seeking locations where previous visitors had been injured or killed, believing these forbidden zones would provide the most dramatic backdrops for his photography. His marketing background had taught him that controversy and risk generated engagement, and he applied this philosophy to his personal social media with reckless abandon. The Norris Geyser Basin backcountry area contained numerous unmarked hot springs, with ground temperatures exceeding 180 degrees Fahrenheit, accessible only through unofficial trails that park rangers actively discouraged. These thermal features were particularly dangerous because they lacked the boardwalks and safety barriers found at popular tourist destinations. Owen arrived at the thermal area at dawn, after hiking 2 miles off the marked trail system, deliberately avoiding official paths where rangers might spot him. He carried professional photography equipment worth several $1,000s, completely ignoring park regulations that prohibited visitors from approaching unmarked thermal features. His research had identified an unnamed hot spring approximately 15 feet in diameter that had been the site of previous accidents, making it perfect for his purposes. The spring's remote location and tragic history would make his photographs stand out from typical tourist shots, feeding his ego and providing the dramatic content he craved. At 6:45 a.m., Owen approached the hot spring with his camera equipment, stepping confidently onto what appeared to be solid ground around the spring's perimeter. His expensive hiking boots and professional outdoor gear gave him a false sense of security as he positioned himself for the perfect shot. The ground surface was actually a thin layer of mineral deposits and organic matter formed over scalding water, creating a deceptive crust that could not support human weight. His first step broke through this fragile barrier, plunging his right leg into 180-degree thermal water up to his thigh, causing immediate excruciating pain. Owen screamed and instinctively tried to pull his leg out, but his panicked movements caused more unstable ground to collapse beneath him. He sank waist-deep into the deadly spring as severe burns immediately began destroying his skin and muscle tissue, while thermal shock sent his body into immediate physiological crisis. His frantic attempts to escape only resulted in deeper submersion into the superheated water, which began cooking his internal organs and causing his core body temperature to rise to fatal levels. Within 3 minutes, Owen had lost consciousness from shock and pain as his cardiovascular system began shutting down. Park investigators found his rental car the next day, triggering a search that located his body 18 hours after the incident. The recovery team discovered his expensive camera equipment at the spring's edge, along with photos showing his final moments before the fatal accident. This tragic incident serves as a stark reminder that nature's most beautiful features can also be its most deadly. It was August 6, 2016, in Killeen, Texas. The evening heat pressed against the blacktop of a busy local mall parking lot, where carts rattled and engines revved as shoppers hurried in and out. The lot was crowded as usual, rows of cars packed tight with families weaving between them. It was routine chaos, until a confrontation turned into something irreversible. Diane Stokes, 47, was a familiar figure in Central Texas. She drifted through clerical jobs, but was known more for her sharp temper than her work. Employees at local stores recognized her as the type to argue at length over small inconveniences. She thrived on control, pushing conflicts further than most people would dare. She was also obese, carrying well over 200 pounds on her 5'4" frame, a fact that often left her winded with exertion but unwilling to admit any limitation. Parking lots, in particular, seemed to bring out her worst, an arena where she often called out other drivers and pedestrians for imagined slights. That evening, Diane parked in a middle row, returning later to find a stray shopping cart wedged against her sedan. Nearby, a man in his 20s was gathering carts into a line. Witnesses said she immediately confronted him, shouting that he had damaged her car. The worker tried to continue his task, ignoring her as he pushed the row of metal carts forward. Diane stepped in front of them, planting herself in the narrow lane. The carts, heavy with momentum, struck her thighs, causing her to stumble. Instead of moving aside, she grabbed the side rail of one cart, yanking hard. The sudden pull destabilized the line, and the front carts jackknifed. The metal frames lurched sideways, one striking her square in the chest. Her weight worked against her. Unable to regain balance quickly, her center of gravity shifted backward. She fell hard onto the sloped asphalt, the back of her head hitting the concrete with a sharp crack. The carts, still moving, rolled partially over her legs before the worker managed to stop them. Witnesses later described the sickening sound when her skull struck the pavement, followed immediately by a dark pool spreading beneath her hair. Her size made it difficult for bystanders to move her, several struggling before realizing she was unresponsive. Some screamed, others froze, while the worker frantically tried to lift the carts off her. Diane's body twitched once, then went still, her eyes open and unresponsive. Within minutes, paramedics arrived, but nothing could be done. Afterward, there was little sympathy. Shoppers who recognized her told reporters she was the same woman they had seen berating cashiers or blocking aisles for arguments no one else wanted. Her collapse was described less as a tragedy than as the natural end of her own confrontational habits. The mall returned to business within hours, quietly noting they would remember the incident more as a disruption than a loss. It was November 19, 2016 in Chicago, Illinois. Holiday shoppers filled the mall, weaving in and out of crowded corridors while the escalators carried people between levels. What began as another Saturday of commerce would end in an accident so sudden and preventable that witnesses struggled to comprehend what they had just seen. Sharon McMillan, 50, was a longtime resident of the city who had built a reputation for being combative in public. She worked as a claims processor for an insurance firm, where co-workers described her as domineering and impatient. Away from work, her interactions were similar. Mall staff knew her as someone who pushed boundaries, demanding discounts or threatening complaints when things did not go her way. Her personality thrived on confrontation, which often escalated to shouting matches over trivial issues. Her neighbors said that risk for Sharon was not physical in the traditional sense, but social. She wielded it to exert control and to humiliate others. That afternoon, Sharon visited a kiosk to argue over a return, claiming the employee was intentionally stalling her. Witnesses later recounted how she berated the worker, drawing attention from shoppers nearby. Security was alerted, but before officers arrived, Sharon stormed away, muttering insults as she pushed through the crowd. Her frustration had not cooled, and she was visibly flustered as she approached the nearest escalator. Escalators are engineered to move thousands of people per day without issue, provided riders follow posted rules. Guardrails, comb plates, and overhead signs are standard safety measures. Still, accidents occur when people ignore the stability required on a moving staircase. Sharon, dismissive of such cautions, treated the mall as another arena to assert herself, oblivious to how quickly her actions could translate into physical danger. The area was packed with shoppers carrying bags. Multiple people urged caution as the flow of traffic narrowed onto the escalator entry. Sharon ignored them, shoving past a young couple and elbowing her way onto the moving steps. At that moment, another shopper jostled against her. Sharon, already leaning forward aggressively, lost her balance. The fall unfolded in seconds. She pitched over the thin metal rail, her arms flailing as startled screams echoed from below. Shoppers reached instinctively, but no one was close enough to grab her. She tumbled nearly 2 stories, her body striking a lower ledge before landing headfirst on the tile floor. The impact was loud, described by witnesses as a sickening thud. Shattered shopping bags and stunned children added to the chaos as people scrambled away from the scene. Others called 911. Security officers arrived within moments, finding Sharon motionless. Blood pooled rapidly beneath her head, and her chest showed no movement. Attempts at CPR were futile, her injuries far too severe. Medical responders confirmed her death minutes later, with catastrophic cranial trauma as the cause. In the hours after the fall, the mall partly shut down as shaken shoppers abandoned purchases and left in silence. Parents hurried children past the cordoned area, and nearby employees admitted the sound of her body hitting the floor stayed with them. One cashier even quit days later, unable to face the escalators again. Without official statements, the memory spread through personal retellings, with witnesses saying ordinary noises, rustling bags, voices. The escalator's hum triggered flashbacks, leaving the mall permanently marked by the image of a woman whose recklessness finally caught up with her. It was June 11, 2016, in Denver, Colorado. The off-leash dog park was buzzing with activity, dogs sprinting across dirt fields while their owners called out commands from the shade. Beneath the surface of the ordinary weekend scene, tension was brewing, and by the end of the morning, a single reckless confrontation would leave the park stunned and a life cut short. Elaine Roberts, 47, was a longtime resident of the neighborhood. She worked part-time as a bookkeeper and was known more for her constant complaints than her professional reputation. Neighbors often avoided her because of her habit of confronting people over minor issues: trash left outside, loud music, or the way they walked their pets. She carried that same confrontational approach into the dog park, where she repeatedly berated owners she viewed as careless. The park itself was structured for mixed use: wide open dirt areas for running, a pond for swimming, and clear signage noting that dogs would be off-leash inside the perimeter. Owners were expected to monitor their pets closely and intervene if aggression surfaced. Large breeds often played alongside small ones without incident, but conflicts required calm handling and distance. The environment was safe when people respected its dynamics, but those who ignored the unpredictability of animals introduced unnecessary danger. That morning, Elaine brought her terrier to the park and quickly grew irritated when a large German shepherd ran near her dog. Witnesses later said the shepherd showed no overt aggression, but Elaine interpreted its curiosity as a threat. She shouted across the field that the dog should be leashed, drawing unwanted attention. The owner called the shepherd back, but Elaine continued yelling, waving her arms and accusing him of endangering others. When nearby owners asked her to calm down, she refused, striding forward and pointing directly at the shepherd while demanding it be put down. Her movements escalated the situation. She leaned toward the animal, jabbing her finger in its direction. The shepherd, startled by her sudden lunge, reacted defensively. Its owner grabbed the collar, but before full restraint could be applied, the dog lunged forward. Elaine extended her hand in an attempt to push it back, which placed her forearm directly in line with its jaws. The shepherd clamped down hard, crushing and tearing tissue in one violent motion. The park fell into chaos. Multiple people rushed in, one striking the dog with a jacket, another prying at its mouth using an emergency wedge technique. The shepherd was pulled off within seconds, but the damage was catastrophic. Elaine collapsed backward onto the dirt, clutching her right forearm as bright red arterial blood sprayed from the wound. Witnesses described the volume as overwhelming, pooling rapidly on the ground. Several owners acted quickly. A bystander pressed a towel firmly against the wound while another screamed for someone to call 911. The towel was soaked instantly, and Elaine's face grew pale as her body slumped. When direct pressure failed to stop the bleeding, one man removed his belt and improvised a tourniquet, cinching it tightly above the wound on her upper forearm. For several minutes, they tried to keep her conscious, but her breathing became shallow. Paramedics arrived within 8 minutes. They replaced the makeshift tourniquet with a medical-grade one and began fluid resuscitation. Elaine was rushed to a trauma center, but the brachial artery had been completely severed. Despite surgical attempts to repair the damage and massive transfusions, the blood loss had pushed her into irreversible shock. She was pronounced dead within hours of arrival. Animal control placed the German Shepherd under mandatory quarantine, testing it for rabies and reviewing eyewitness accounts. The investigation concluded the dog had been provoked and was not inherently dangerous. The animal was released back to its owner after the holding period. Her funeral was held privately. Neighbors acknowledged her combative reputation, but expressed disbelief that such behavior could end in death. It was June 14, 2015, and the morning fog clung to the dramatic coastline of Big Sur as Elena Vasquez positioned her camera equipment along the clifftop ceremony site. The exclusive cliffside resort commanded breathtaking views 400 feet above the Pacific Ocean, where waves crashed against jagged rocks that had claimed countless victims over the decades. The wealthy couple had specifically requested Elena for her reputation of capturing death-defying wedding photos that would dominate social media feeds. Elena had built her photography business on dramatic cliff-edge shots that other photographers were too cautious to attempt. At 29, she had photographed over 200 weddings, each more daring than the last as couples demanded increasingly extreme backdrops for their special day. Her Instagram portfolio showcased brides and grooms posed mere inches from deadly drops, creating images that generated thousands of likes and lucrative referrals. The cliffside resort location had been Elena's suggestion after the couple expressed disappointment with boring traditional venues. She had scouted the site 3 weeks earlier, noting the unstable sandstone edges, but dismissing the danger in favor of the spectacular photographic opportunities. Recent winter storms had further eroded the cliff face, creating overhangs that appeared solid but were actually death traps waiting to collapse. Elena's assistant operated a backup camera from a safe distance while Elena moved closer to the precipice, her professional camera set to burst mode to capture every moment of the ceremony. The couple trusted her expertise completely, following her directions to pose closer to the edge while she backed up to frame the perfect shot that would justify their $15,000 photography fee. Elena's camera recorded in burst mode as she directed the couple to look more romantic while backing toward the cliff edge. The sequence of photos showed her shadow growing longer as she stepped backward, completely focused on her viewfinder rather than the crumbling ground beneath her feet. Her professional instincts demanded the perfect angle, even as warning signs of loose rock went unnoticed. The final frames captured the moment the cliff edge gave way beneath Elena's feet, the camera tipping wildly as she realized her mistake. The images were a chaotic blur of crumbling rock, jagged coastline, and glimpses of her terrified hands as she fell, her scream echoing off the canyon walls while wedding guests watched in horror. The camera, encased in its professional protective case, tumbled over the cliff, smashing against jagged rocks. Its body and lens were destroyed, but the memory card inside survived, preserving the last images Elena had taken. Coast Guard rescue teams recovered her body and the wrecked equipment 3 hours later, using the memory card to piece together the tragic sequence of events. The final photos on her memory card became crucial evidence in the lawsuit against the resort for inadequate safety barriers. Elena's death led to new regulations requiring safety equipment at all clifftop wedding venues, while her final photographs were sealed by court order, but became legendary warnings in photography circles about the deadly cost of the perfect shot. It was August 22nd, 2015, near Sacramento, California. A group of office workers gathered at a bungee jumping site built over the American River, the late summer air dry and still. It was meant to be a team-building retreat, the type of event companies use to break down barriers among employees. Instead, it became the scene of a violent death that could have been avoided. Cynthia Walker was 45 years old, and worked in mid-level administration at a financial services firm. Colleagues described her as outspoken and controlling, quick to humiliate others in meetings. She often mocked co-workers for hesitating or second-guessing themselves, equating caution with weakness. Outside of work, she carried that same attitude into daily life, frequently berating store clerks and waitstaff. She seemed to thrive on being the loudest presence in the room and sought every opportunity to assert dominance. Bungee jumping had been chosen for the retreat because it was thrilling but safe when procedures were followed. Operators used heavy-duty harnesses, double-checked buckles, and attached each participant's tether to a reinforced steel rig secured above the bridge platform. The jump itself was about 160 feet, with the rope designed to stretch safely while avoiding contact with the rocks and river below. Staff emphasized that every step of the setup mattered. A jumper who ignored instructions or disrupted the process could put themselves in immediate danger. When it was Cynthia's turn, the risks increased, not because of the activity itself, but because of her behavior. She had already ridiculed one coworker for his hesitation, calling him spineless in front of the group. Her mocking laughter carried across the platform, making others uncomfortable. When the staff member began explaining the safety briefing, she waved him off, insisting she didn't need to be lectured. He attempted to guide her through the final harness check, but she brushed past his instructions. Several witnesses later recalled the growing tension. The operator tried to tighten a secondary buckle, but Cynthia turned away from him. She positioned herself on the edge of the platform, ignoring the fact that her tether had not yet been fully straightened and secured. The staff shouted for her to wait, but she smirked and jumped before the all-clear was given. The accident unfolded in seconds. Because she jumped before the tether was fully straightened, it tightened with a twist, snapping taut at an angle. The uneven pull swung her violently to the side, slamming her body against one of the bridge's concrete supports. The operators scrambled to reach her, rappelling down quickly, but her injuries were catastrophic. She had sustained massive blunt force trauma from the collision with the bridge and multiple fractures from the fall into the rocks. By the time they reached her, she showed no signs of life. Emergency responders were called by the workers, arriving within 15 minutes, but she was pronounced dead at the scene. Her funeral was sparsely attended, held at a small chapel in her hometown. Relatives spoke in muted tones, avoiding the subject of how the accident happened. Some remembered her as strong-willed, while others admitted privately that her temper often pushed people away. A cousin noted the absence of many co-workers, saying it felt as if the tragedy had closed a chapter no one wished to revisit. Instead of a collective outpouring of grief, the service carried an air of uneasy silence. It was November 18, 2014, and the fluorescent lights of the Jacksonville Walmart Supercenter buzzed overhead as Black Friday shoppers began their early holiday preparations. The massive 180,000-square-foot store hummed with activity as customers navigated aisles stocked with seasonal merchandise, while cashiers prepared for the upcoming shopping frenzy. The customer service desk already showed signs of stress with returns and exchanges, creating long lines of frustrated shoppers. Linda Davis wheeled her overflowing shopping cart toward the checkout lanes, followed by 3 additional carts she had strategically positioned throughout the store during her 6-hour shopping expedition. At 39, the part-time bookkeeper had transformed extreme couponing into a full-time obsession, spending over 40 hours per week organizing deals and planning elaborate shopping trips that she documented on her blog. Her dining room table had been converted into a coupon command center with filing systems that would impress corporate accountants. Linda had been banned from 3 other Walmart locations for aggressive behavior during coupon disputes, including a 2-hour standoff over expired manufacturer coupons and a physical altercation with a cashier who questioned her coupon authenticity. She carried a 3-ring binder containing 847 coupons for today's trip, organized by product category and expiration date, expecting to pay less than $50 for over $2,000 worth of merchandise. Her husband had threatened divorce twice over her coupon obsession, particularly after she converted their guest bedroom into a storage facility for her inventory. Linda's blog followers worshipped her ability to game the system, but store employees across Jacksonville had begun sharing her photo in break rooms, warning each other about the woman who turned simple transactions into hours-long ordeals. Her shopping strategy involved purchasing items in bulk when coupons offered the best deals, then stockpiling products in her garage until she could use them or resell them online. Linda's neighbors had complained about delivery trucks constantly arriving at her house, and her homeowners association had cited her for operating a business from her residence. The checkout process began at 4:30 p.m. and immediately devolved into chaos as Linda presented coupon after coupon while arguing about store policies with increasingly frustrated cashiers. 3 managers were called to resolve disputes over expired coupons, fraudulent manufacturer offers, and quantity limits that Linda insisted didn't apply to her. The line behind her grew to over 20 customers as her transaction consumed 2 full hours. Linda's voice grew shriller with each rejected coupon, her face turning crimson as she quoted corporate policy numbers and threatened legal action against individual employees. When the store manager informed Linda that 247 of her coupons were expired or fraudulent, she exploded into a rage that could be heard throughout the front of the store. She demanded to speak with the district manager and leaned aggressively over the customer service counter, shouting about corporate policies and threatening to sue the store for discrimination. Her 3-ring binder fell open, spilling hundreds of carefully organized coupons across the floor as she stepped onto a small platform behind the counter to get a better view. Linda lost her footing on the wet surface, slipped on promotional flyers scattered across the platform, and fell backward, striking her head on the concrete floor with a sickening crack that silenced the entire checkout area. Her skull fractured on impact, causing massive brain hemorrhaging as her carefully organized coupons scattered across the floor like confetti. She lost consciousness immediately, her body convulsing as customers screamed and employees called 911. Emergency responders found Linda surrounded by hundreds of coupons, many of which investigators later determined were sophisticated counterfeits. She died at Memorial Hospital from her head injuries, with police discovering over $50,000 worth of fraudulent coupons in her possession. Walmart implemented new policies, limiting coupon quantities and requiring identification for large coupon transactions, while Linda's death became a case study in retail fraud training programs. It was August 3, 2018, and the Los Angeles skyline glittered in the afternoon sun as Sophia Williams prepared for the stunt that would change her life forever. The 23-year-old social media influencer had gained 5,000 Instagram followers by performing increasingly dangerous rooftop stunts across the city, and today's live stream would either secure her financial future or end her career permanently. Over 4,000 viewers were already watching as she prepared to walk across the 6-inch wide ledge, running around the edge of the 30-story rooftop. Sophia had built her brand on death-defying content that other influencers were too afraid to attempt, turning her fearlessness into a lucrative career that attracted major sponsorship deals. The energy drink company had offered her $10,000 to perform this particular stunt during a live stream, enough money to secure her independence and prove that social media could be a legitimate career path. Her parents had begged her to find safer content, but Sophia was addicted to the adrenaline and attention that dangerous stunts provided. The rooftop location had been scouted weeks earlier, with Sophia practicing the route once during daylight hours when she could focus entirely on the crossing. But live streaming added a dangerous element of distraction, as she would need to interact with her audience while balancing on the 6-inch wide concrete ledge 300 feet above the busy street. Her confidence was bolstered by previous successful stunts, but she had never attempted anything this dangerous while divided between performance and survival. Sophia's phone camera captured her confident smile as she stepped onto the narrow ledge, her designer sneakers gripping the concrete, while she waved to her growing audience. The live stream showed her losing focus as she tried to read comments from viewers, many of whom were encouraging her to take even bigger risks for their entertainment. Her attention split between the deadly crossing and her phone screen as engagement numbers climbed higher than ever before. A sudden gust of wind caught Sophia off guard, and her phone continued streaming as she fought to maintain balance on the narrow ledge. The camera recorded a frantic blur of motion, her arms windmilling, the skyline spinning wildly, and her terrified scream was audible to thousands of viewers before the feed cut out mid-fall. Viewers flooded the chat in panic, realizing she had never resumed the stream. Emergency responders later found Sophia's body on the crushed roof of a sedan, her shattered phone scattered across the sidewalk. Viewers had already saved and shared the brief clip from the live stream, and it spread across social media before platforms could remove it, sparking international debates about online responsibility. The incident reignited public debate about social media's role in encouraging dangerous stunts. Instagram faced pressure to limit risky live stream content, and Sophia's final broadcast was soon used in digital ethics courses as a case study on the dark side of viral fame. It was September 8, 2016, and Snake River Canyon stretched before Ryan "Rocket" Johnson like the ultimate test of his daredevil career. The 35-year-old professional stunt performer had spent 2 years planning his attempt to recreate Evel Knievel's famous canyon jump using modern rocket-powered motorcycle technology. Multiple cameras positioned around the 1,500-foot canyon gap would capture every angle of the jump for a documentary about modern daredevils, while Ryan's helmet camera would provide the most intimate footage of his historic attempt. Ryan had calculated every aspect of the jump with scientific precision, studying wind patterns, trajectory angles, and landing zone requirements with the help of aerospace engineers. His specially modified motorcycle incorporated the latest rocket technology and dual parachute systems designed to ensure a safe landing on the canyon's far side. Weather conditions were perfect, with minimal wind and clear visibility that would allow the cameras to capture every moment of his flight. The documentary crew had been following Ryan's preparation for months, documenting his training regimen and the technical challenges of recreating one of stunt history's most famous failures. Ryan's confidence was absolute as he revved his rocket-powered motorcycle, believing that modern technology would succeed where Evel Knievel had failed decades earlier. His helmet camera captured his pre-jump routine as he accelerated down the launch ramp toward the canyon edge. Ryan's helmet camera recorded him accelerating to nearly 200 miles per hour under rocket thrust as he raced toward the launch ramp, the horizontal speed calculated to carry him safely across the 1,500-foot gap. The Snake River was visible far below as his motorcycle launched perfectly into the air, the rocket motor propelling him forward while multiple cameras captured the historic leap from every angle. The camera recorded the moment Ryan's primary parachute deployment system malfunctioned, failing to slow his descent as he reached the apex of his jump. As he began to fall, the helmet camera footage became increasingly chaotic and disorienting, spinning and tumbling violently as Ryan and his motorcycle plummeted toward the canyon floor. The shaky footage captured glimpses of his desperate attempt to deploy the backup chute, but the violent motion made it impossible to see clear details of his actions. It took rescue crews nearly 6 hours to recover Ryan's body and motorcycle, as the steep canyon walls and loose rock made descent dangerous. Rappelling teams had to secure anchor points before reaching the crash site, and a helicopter was eventually used to airlift the wreckage out at sunset. The helmet camera was destroyed on impact, but investigators were able to recover part of the memory card. Only fragments of the footage were salvageable, showing Ryan's jump, the moment of parachute failure, and a few seconds of his struggle before the data cut off. Forensic inspection of the recovered parachute hardware revealed clean tool marks on the primary deployment pin and residue from a cutting blade on the backup chute lines, clear signs of deliberate tampering. Investigators traced the sabotage to a disgruntled former crew member who had recently been dismissed from the project. The fragmented helmet footage showed Ryan's final moments, while the forensic findings confirmed the cause of the disaster. The documentary featuring Ryan's jump was completed posthumously, serving as both a tribute to his courage and a warning about the deadly consequences when safety systems fail. It was July 11, 2015 in Bloomington, Minnesota. A mall was crowded with weekend shoppers moving between stores, food courts, and attractions. Music from kiosks mixed with the constant hum of conversation. On the second level, one of the escalators near the east wing was partially cordoned with a yellow caution cone, a reminder of recent cleaning. Most people diverted to nearby stairs or elevators, but not everyone chose to wait. Linda McClellan, 52, was a longtime resident of the Twin Cities and a regular mall visitor. She worked in property management, but was better known among local shop employees for her sharp tongue and short temper. Clerks recalled her demanding refunds or lecturing staff about service. Away from public spaces, she lived alone in a quiet apartment complex. Shopping was one of her routines, a way to pass time as well as exercise control in an environment where she felt she held authority. The escalator itself was standard for the mall, a two-story incline of steel steps with rubber handrails and grooved treads. Cleaning crews often mopped them late mornings, leaving cones for damp surfaces. The danger was not hidden. Slips on moving escalators can lead to severe head injuries due to the sharp metal edges. Mall policy relied on clear signage and cones rather than closing the escalators entirely, expecting visitors to heed the warnings. That afternoon, Linda noticed a janitor finishing his work near the base of the escalator. Dissatisfied with the streaks she thought she saw on the steps, she made her disapproval known, raising her voice at the worker. Witnesses later described her as visibly irritated, muttering as she walked. Without slowing, she stepped past the caution cone and onto the moving escalator, still clutching her shopping bags. Other shoppers hesitated but did not intervene, assuming she would steady herself. As she climbed, her heel slipped on a damp patch of metal. The shift was sudden. Her weight rocked forward, then snapped backward as she fought to steady herself. Her shopping bag swung wildly, pulling her further off balance. For an instant, she clutched at the handrail, fingers scraping, before her grip failed. Her body twisted awkwardly as she toppled. The fall was violent. Her back struck first, her head snapping against the jagged edge of a rising step. She slid downward, limbs jerking against the moving teeth of the machine, each ridge scraping fabric and skin. A red smear began to streak across the steps, darkening as blood pulsed from the wound at the back of her skull. Shoppers recoiled, some shouting, others frozen in horror. A man shoved toward the emergency button. The machinery jolted to a stop, leaving her body half collapsed across the metal. Security and medical staff on scene rushed to her. CPR was attempted on the landing, but the extent of the head trauma was clear. The fractured skull had caused catastrophic damage, and she was declared dead before transport. Shaken shoppers were escorted away while staff draped barriers to block the view. In the days that followed, several mall workers were offered counseling, one janitor later admitting he avoided the East Wing entirely for weeks. Among frequent shoppers, the story spread by word of mouth rather than through official channels. Parents warning children to avoid escalators, clerks recalling the sound of her fall in hushed tones. Her family arranged a quiet burial at a local cemetery, declining press inquiries. It was May 20th, 2013, and the Oklahoma sky churned with the ominous rotation that veteran storm chasers recognized as the precursor to catastrophic destruction. Jake Morrison adjusted his dashboard cameras as he drove toward Moore, Oklahoma, where an EF5 tornado was forming with winds that would soon exceed 200 miles per hour. His modified chase vehicle bristled with recording equipment while 5,000 viewers watched his live stream, many encouraging him to get closer to the massive storm system. Jake had built his YouTube following by getting dangerously close to tornadoes, earning 4,000 subscribers who craved the adrenaline rush of his near-death encounters with nature's most violent phenomena. At 34, he had been chasing storms for 8 years, each season pushing closer to the deadly vortexes that had made him internet famous. His sponsors demanded increasingly dramatic footage, and Jake delivered by ignoring safety protocols that kept other chasers alive. His chase vehicle had been modified with reinforced windows and a roll cage, but these safety features were designed for debris impacts, not direct tornado encounters. Jake's wife had left him 6 months earlier, taking their 2 children and citing his reckless behavior as grounds for divorce. She had begged him to find safer content, but Jake was addicted to the rush of fame and the substantial income his dangerous videos generated. His therapist had diagnosed him with an addiction to risk-taking behavior, but Jake dismissed the sessions as unnecessary interference with his career. The storm-chasing community had ostracized Jake after he violated their unwritten code of safety, with veteran chasers refusing to share weather data or coordinate with someone they considered a dangerous amateur. His isolation from the professional community meant he relied solely on public weather reports and his own judgment, missing crucial information about the tornado's unprecedented strength and erratic behavior patterns. Jake's equipment setup included 6 cameras positioned throughout his vehicle, designed to capture every angle of his encounters with severe weather. His dashboard displayed real-time wind speed measurements, GPS coordinates, and live stream viewer counts that had become more important to him than actual safety data. The chat feed scrolled constantly with messages from viewers betting on whether he would survive each encounter, treating his life-threatening stunts like entertainment rather than the deadly serious situations they represented. Weather experts had been broadcasting urgent warnings for storm chasers to maintain safe distances from what meteorologists were calling a once-in-a-decade tornado outbreak. But Jake saw opportunity where others saw danger, believing that unprecedented footage of an EF5 tornado would finally land him the television contract he had been pursuing. His live stream chat exploded with excitement as he announced his intention to drive directly into the tornado's path. The National Weather Service had issued its most severe tornado warning in years, with meteorologists pleading for all storm chasers to evacuate the area immediately. Jake ignored these warnings, convinced that his modified vehicle and years of experience would protect him from the unprecedented storm system bearing down on Moore. His final social media post before entering the tornado's path read, "As going to get footage that will change everything. Wish me luck." Jake's dashboard camera captured him laughing and joking about the incredible footage as the tornado grew larger in his windshield, its massive funnel stretching from the ground to the storm clouds above. His final words to his audience were, he shouted to the live stream viewers that this would be his most famous footage yet, his excitement barely masking the danger surrounding him. As he accelerated toward the outer circulation of the deadly vortex, debris already beginning to pelt his reinforced windshield with increasing intensity. Debris began striking Jake's vehicle as he drove into the tornado's outer circulation, and his excited commentary quickly turned to alarm when a piece of flying metal shattered his windshield. The dashboard camera recorded the final chaotic moments, the vehicle being violently lifted, slammed, and tossed by the tornado. Within seconds, the extreme winds and flying debris destroyed the equipment, and the live stream abruptly ended, cutting off all images and sound. Many viewers watched the live stream of Jake, but the signal cut out before the tornado completely overtook his vehicle. Some viewers captured the brief footage before it was removed by platform moderators. Search and rescue teams found his mangled vehicle and body 2 miles from where he had entered the tornado's path, scattered among the debris of destroyed homes and businesses. Jake's final video became a cautionary tale about extreme storm chasing, while YouTube implemented new policies restricting live streams of dangerous activities after his death, sparked international controversy about the responsibility of social media platforms. It was November 6, 2017 in New York City. The Union Square subway station was crowded with evening commuters, a familiar blend of impatience, fatigue, and routine. Announcements echoed against tiled walls, trains roared in and out, and footsteps filled the platforms. Among the hundreds passing through, one rider would not leave the station alive. Brenda Weiss was 54, a longtime New Yorker who had spent most of her career as an office administrator for a mid-level insurance firm. Known by colleagues as sharp-tongued and stubborn, she prided herself on standing her ground in any situation. Outside work, she lived alone in a small apartment in Queens and had few close friends. Public transit had been the background of her daily life for decades, but she was notorious among staff for confrontations, especially during service delays. The subway system itself is an unforgiving environment. Tracks lie in an open trough between platforms, with 2 running rails carrying the train and a third electrified rail powering it. That rail carries over 600 volts of direct current, enough to kill instantly. Platforms are lined with warning strips, and frequent announcements remind passengers never to enter the track area. Despite this, incidents occur every year, often the result of accidents, disputes, or poor judgment. That evening, Brenda was on her way home after work. Trains were delayed due to a signal issue, and the crowd at Union Square had thickened. Witnesses later reported she cut ahead in line as a packed downtown train pulled in, pushing past several younger commuters. When challenged, she raised her voice, escalating the argument into shouts. As the verbal clash grew louder, she shoved one rider who tried to block her path. The movement left her off balance at the platform's edge. In the chaos, her foot slipped against the yellow safety strip. She teetered, arms flailing, before tipping forward into the open trough. Gasps rippled through the crowd as she landed between the rails, her body inches from the electrified line. For a split second, she tried to push herself up, but her left hand made direct contact with the third rail. The effect was immediate and violent. A bright flash lit the space, followed by crackling sparks. Her body stiffened and jerked uncontrollably, muscles locked by the current. Screams erupted as the smell of burning cloth and flesh spread across the platform. Some commuters instinctively reached forward, tossing jackets and scarves, desperate to pull her clear without touching her directly. None of it worked. The current held her in place, coursing through her body until her movements slowed and stopped. Station staff triggered power cutoffs, but by then the damage was irreversible. When the current ceased, she collapsed awkwardly across the ties, smoke rising faintly from her clothing. Emergency medical teams were called by the staff, rushing down within minutes, but examination confirmed what witnesses already knew. She had suffered catastrophic burns and cardiac arrest almost instantly. The platform was cleared, trains rerouted, and police sealed off the area for investigation. Commuters were shaken, some still crying as they exited the station. Surveillance footage confirmed the sequence of events: the argument, the shove, the stumble, and the fatal contact with the rail. Unlike most transit fatalities that leave a community in shock, Brenda's passing drew little sympathy. Witnesses described her as combative even in her final minutes, screaming at strangers and forcing her way forward. Some commuters remarked afterward that her temper had written the ending as much as the third rail had. The station was cleared, power restored, and trains resumed service within hours. It was June 3, 2018, and the original Starbucks location in Seattle's Pike Place Market buzzed with its usual mix of tourists and coffee enthusiasts. The historic coffee house's exposed brick walls and vintage fixtures created an authentic atmosphere, while baristas worked behind the curved counter, crafting drinks for customers who lined up to experience the birthplace of the global coffee empire. The afternoon crowd included business professionals, students, and social media influencers documenting their Seattle experience for their followers. Jennifer Clark positioned herself strategically near the pickup counter, her phone already live streaming to her 1,200 followers as she prepared for what she expected to be her most viral confrontation yet. At 35, the social media manager had built her online presence by posting daily videos of herself, exposing poor customer service and confronting workers who failed to meet her standards. Her Instagram account featured dozens of videos showing her berating minimum wage employees, while her followers cheered her on in the comments. Jennifer had developed a systematic approach to creating viral content, deliberately ordering complicated custom drinks and then escalating minor mistakes into major confrontations. She carried a ring light and phone tripod to ensure professional quality footage of her public meltdowns, treating each incident like a carefully choreographed performance designed to generate maximum engagement and outrage. Her complicated order, a venti iced skinny vanilla latte with oat milk, extra foam, light ice, 2 pumps of sugar-free vanilla, and cinnamon powder, had been prepared by a nervous teenage barista who accidentally used regular vanilla syrup instead of sugar-free. Jennifer saw this as the perfect opportunity to create content that would trend across multiple platforms while simultaneously destroying the young employee's confidence. Jennifer climbed onto a wooden chair and then onto a small cafe table to get the perfect camera angle, while live streaming her tirade about unacceptable service standards to her growing audience. Her followers flooded the chat with fire emojis and encouragement as she gestured wildly, pointing at the terrified barista while delivering a scathing monologue about millennial work ethic and customer service failures. The antique cafe table, designed for coffee cups rather than supporting a 140-pound adult, began to wobble under Jennifer's animated movements. She was so focused on her performance and the positive feedback from her livestream audience that she ignored the creaking sounds and unstable surface beneath her feet. The table collapsed suddenly, sending Jennifer crashing into the antique glass pastry display case below. The impact shattered the old glass into large, jagged shards, one of which sliced deep into her neck and severed her carotid artery. Blood sprayed across the white tile floor as her phone continued live streaming, hundreds of followers watching in shock as her final moments played out in real time. The teenage barista, whom she had been humiliating, screamed and ran to get help while customers called 911. Paramedics arrived within 4 minutes, but couldn't control the arterial bleeding caused by the glass shards embedded in Jennifer's neck. Her live stream captured her final gasps as she died on the Starbucks floor, surrounded by broken glass and spilled coffee. Jennifer's death went viral for all the wrong reasons, becoming a cautionary tale about social media obsession and the dangers of treating real people as content for online entertainment. The teenage barista quit her job and required months of counseling after witnessing the traumatic death, while Starbucks implemented new policies about customer behavior and installed safety barriers around all display cases. It was July 2nd, 2018 in Miami, Florida. The condo pool area was crowded with families. Children splashed in the shallow end while parents chatted from lounge chairs. Within an hour, this ordinary afternoon would leave the community stunned, witnesses replaying in their minds how one reckless moment turned fatal. Teresa Howard, 48, lived in the building and was known among residents for her confrontational behavior. She worked in real estate, a career that rewarded her bluntness, but also fueled a habit of belittling those around her. Neighbors described her as quick-tempered, often escalating minor issues into public scenes. Her motivation was less about preserving order and more about asserting control. She treated risk casually, assuming rules and precautions applied to others rather than herself. That afternoon, Teresa became enraged at a group of children laughing and splashing near the shallow end. She accused their mother of letting them disrupt the pool and launched into a loud tirade. The condo pool was maintained according to code, with lifeguards on duty, posted rules, and anti-slip surfacing around the deck. Still, wet pavement and running children created predictable hazards. Lifeguards emphasized caution, reminding adults and children alike about the risks of slick tiles and unguarded edges. Teresa ignored such warnings. Eyewitnesses later reported she stood over the water, pointing aggressively and shouting insults. The children retreated, frightened, while other residents turned away in discomfort. A lifeguard approached to calm the situation, but Teresa's voice only rose as she gestured toward the children, demanding they leave. The tension escalated until Teresa abruptly turned to storm off. Her sandals skidded on the wet deck, the water she had been standing near spreading across the tiles. Witnesses saw her lose her footing, her arms flailing as she toppled backward. The back of her head struck the pool's concrete edge with a sharp crack that echoed across the deck. In the same motion, her body rolled lifelessly into the shallow water. Two lifeguards dove in immediately, pulling Teresa's unconscious body to the surface. Blood from the head wound mixed with the pool water, leaving no doubt about the severity of the injury. CPR was started on the deck as residents gathered in shock. Despite repeated compressions and rescue breaths, Teresa never regained consciousness. Emergency responders called by the lifeguards confirmed her death within minutes of arrival, citing blunt force trauma. In the days that followed, conversations in the condo lobby and mailroom carried less sympathy than blunt honesty. Residents described the scene again and again, but almost always with the same refrain, that Teresa had finally pushed too far, and this time her own stubbornness had caught up with her. Parents admitted they felt relief that their children would no longer be targets of her shouting. It was July 14th, 2015, and the scorching Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the asphalt parking lot of the Target shopping center in Plano. The temperature had already climbed to 98 degrees by 2 p.m., creating shimmering heat waves that danced across the crowded lot filled with shoppers seeking air-conditioned relief. The smell of hot concrete mixed with exhaust fumes from idling cars as families hurried between their vehicles and the store's automatic doors. Patricia Williams adjusted her oversized sunglasses as she surveyed the parking lot like a general inspecting troops. At 42, the real estate agent had earned a reputation throughout her neighborhood as the unofficial parking enforcement officer, documenting violations with the dedication of a professional investigator. Her silver Honda Civic contained a glove compartment stuffed with printed parking regulations, a measuring tape, and a notebook filled with license plate numbers of repeat offenders. Patricia had been involved in over 30 documented disputes with neighbors, store employees, and complete strangers over the past year alone. Her homeowners association had received so many complaints about her confrontational behavior that they'd issued her a formal warning about harassment. But Patricia saw herself as a crusader for order in a chaotic world. someone willing to do what others were too cowardly to attempt. The motorcycle caught her attention immediately. A gleaming black Harley-Davidson parked diagonally across two prime spaces near the store entrance. Patricia's blood pressure spiked as she calculated the injustice. One selfish person taking up two spots during peak shopping hours while families circled the lot searching for parking. She pulled out her phone and began recording, her voice dripping with righteous indignation as she documented what she planned to be her most viral confrontation yet. Patricia positioned herself directly behind the 800-pound motorcycle, her phone camera capturing every detail as she delivered a scathing monologue about parking etiquette and social responsibility. The absent owner would return to find their bike properly positioned, she declared, because someone needed to teach these inconsiderate people a lesson about community standards. Despite having zero experience with motorcycles, Patricia grabbed the handlebars and attempted to push the massive machine into a single parking space. The Harley's weight immediately overwhelmed her 130-pound frame, and she lost her balance as the bike tilted beyond her control. The motorcycle crashed down on top of her with devastating force, its full weight crushing her chest and pinning her arms beneath the hot metal. Patricia struggled desperately under the crushing weight, her phone still recording as she gasped for air that wouldn't come. The motorcycle's engine guard pressed against her ribcage, preventing her lungs from expanding while the scorching exhaust pipe burned through her blouse. Her legs kicked frantically against the asphalt as she fought to free herself, but the bike's position made escape impossible. A few minutes later, a Target employee discovered Patricia's body still trapped beneath the motorcycle, her phone's battery finally dead after recording her entire ordeal. Security footage revealed her confident approach and fatal miscalculation, while her final video showed the moment her parking lot vigilantism turned deadly. The motorcycle's owner returned to find police tape and paramedics, completely unaware that his parking choice had inadvertently caused a death. Patricia's story became a viral cautionary tale about the dangers of taking justice into your own hands. It was July 2, 2018 in Bakersfield, California. The afternoon heat pressed down on the city, shimmering across asphalt parking lots and roadside stalls. Families lined up at temporary stands to buy fireworks ahead of the holiday. Among the bright packaging and banners, one tent would soon turn from a place of excitement into the scene of a fatal disaster. Cynthia Lopez, 36, was known in her neighborhood for her quick temper and bluntness. A former cashier who had bounced between jobs, she carried a reputation for berating clerks and teenagers who crossed her path. She lived alone in a small rental house, often filling her evenings with TV and cigarettes. Independence mattered to her, and she prided herself on never being pushed around. In public spaces, that tendency often escalated into conflict. The fireworks stand she visited that day was a temporary structure made of canvas, stretched over metal poles, stacked inside with cardboard boxes of sparklers, rockets, and aerial shells. These tents, while licensed, always carried a margin of danger. Fireworks are composed of black powder, fuses, and chemical compounds, all highly flammable. Regulations required no open flames, visible signage for fire risks, and portable extinguishers on site. Even with precautions, a single ignition could turn the enclosed space into an inferno. That afternoon, Cynthia walked into the tent demanding a refund for a bundle of sparklers she claimed were defective. Witnesses recalled her voice rising as she berated the young staff behind the counter. The employees pointed to the posted signs. No returns and no open flames, but she waved them off. In her agitation, she lit a cigarette while still standing inside, the smoke curling above stacks of boxed fireworks. Staff pleaded with her to step outside, but she ignored the warnings. In her agitation, she dropped the lit cigarette near a partially open box of aerial shells stacked by the counter. The glowing tip rolled against loose paper wrappings and exposed fuses, which caught almost immediately. Sparks raced across the box, and within seconds the first firework ignited, spitting fire into the tent. Panic overtook the space. Employees and customers bolted for the exit, some pulling each other clear. Boxes exploded in rapid bursts, sending embers raining across the lot. Cynthia staggered back from the counter, smoke thickening around her. Witnesses outside saw her silhouette framed by fire, coughing violently, her attempts to shield herself futile against the spreading heat. The tent collapsed inward as supports gave way. flames feeding on every surface. Onlookers used extinguishers and water jugs, but the fire was too fierce, so they dialed 911. Employees dragged each other free, their clothes singed, but Cynthia never emerged. Firefighters arrived minutes later, dousing the wreckage under plumes of black smoke. When crews searched the remains, they found her body near the counter, collapsed against scorched debris. Investigators determined she had died from severe burns and smoke inhalation, likely within moments of being overwhelmed by the blaze. Neighbors who heard what happened said it sounded exactly like her, too stubborn to follow rules, even when the rules existed to keep people alive. Some remarked bitterly that she managed to turn a family fireworks stand into a war zone just by walking in. Relatives kept arrangements minimal, avoiding questions from locals who remembered her as a constant source of arguments. The fire department's final note focused on reminding the public that ignoring safety signs could put everyone at risk. It was April 7, 2014, and One World Trade Center rose majestically into the New York sky as construction crews put the finishing touches on America's tallest building. Tommy Rodriguez adjusted his mandatory body camera as he began his routine safety inspection on the 89th floor, 1,100 feet above the bustling streets of Manhattan. The 41-year-old construction foreman had spent 20 years building the city's skyline, and this final safety check would clear the way for the building's official opening ceremony. Tommy had worked on dozens of skyscrapers throughout his career, earning a reputation for meticulous attention to safety protocols that had kept his crews alive through countless dangerous situations. The body camera was part of new safety measures implemented after several high-profile construction accidents, designed to document proper procedures and identify potential hazards before they became fatal. His experience and caution had made him the perfect choice for this critical final inspection. The inspection had revealed a loose safety cable that posed a potential hazard to future maintenance workers, and Tommy faced a choice between waiting for the specialized safety crew or fixing the problem himself. His 20 years of experience made the repair seem routine, and the pressure to complete the building on schedule influenced his decision to handle the issue personally rather than delay the opening ceremony. Tommy's body camera recorded him leaning over the building's edge to reach the loose cable, his safety harness appearing secure as he stretched toward the wayward line. The footage showed his confident movements as he worked to secure the cable, completely unaware that his harness clip contained a manufacturing defect that had gone unnoticed during routine inspection. His experience had taught him to trust his equipment completely, a trust that would prove fatal. The camera captured the exact moment Tommy's harness clip failed, and he began to fall. His body and the camera tumbled through the air, spinning violently as he plummeted toward the plaza below. The footage became chaotic and disorienting, showing brief flashes of sky, building edges, and the city far below as the camera spun wildly during his descent. The recording captured fragments of his terrified screams mixed with the rushing wind, but no clear view of his face or precise movements during the fall. Tommy's body was found on the plaza below, the body camera destroyed on impact but its memory card recovered from the wreckage. The fragmented footage revealed that the harness's locking carabiner had a hairline crack that snapped under load, leading to a massive recall of defective safety equipment, while the construction company faced criminal charges for inadequate inspection protocols. Tommy's final video became mandatory viewing in construction safety training programs, serving as a permanent reminder that even the most experienced workers are only as safe as their equipment allows. It was August 9, 2017, and the Phoenix sun blazed mercilessly at 115 degrees as heat waves shimmered off the perfectly manicured lawns of Sunset Ridge subdivision. The upscale neighborhood's Spanish-style homes sat behind pristine landscaping, their red tile roofs reflecting the brutal Arizona heat, while automatic sprinkler systems worked overtime to maintain the HOA's strict aesthetic standards. The smell of hot concrete and desert dust hung in the still air, as most residents remained indoors during the peak heat hours. Margaret Thompson emerged from her air-conditioned home at 2 p.m., armed with a measuring tape, ruler, and violation notice pad that had become her weapons of choice. At 45, the Homeowners Association board member had appointed herself as the neighborhood's unofficial enforcement officer, conducting daily patrols with the intensity of a military inspection. Her garage contained filing cabinets filled with violation documentation, photographs of infractions, and a detailed map marking every property that had ever violated HOA standards. Margaret had been feuding with her neighbor Jim Rodriguez for 8 months over his lawn maintenance, issuing 17 violation notices for grass that exceeded the HOA's maximum height of 3 inches. She had purchased professional landscaping tools to ensure her measurements were legally defensible and had threatened Jim with daily fines of $50 until his lawn met community standards. Her obsession with grass height had consumed her life, leading to sleepless nights spent planning enforcement strategies. The scorching afternoon presented the perfect opportunity to build her case against Jim while he was at work. Margaret had been monitoring his watering schedule and knew the grass would be at its tallest after the morning irrigation cycle. She planned to document every blade that exceeded regulations, creating an ironclad case for the HOA board meeting scheduled for the following week. Margaret spent over 90 minutes in the blazing sun, methodically measuring individual grass blades with her ruler while the temperature climbed past 115 degrees. Her focus on documentation was so intense that she ignored her body's warning signs, the dizziness, nausea, and confusion that indicated dangerous heat exhaustion. Sweat poured down her face as she crawled across Jim's lawn, her notebook filling with precise measurements that she believed would finally end their dispute. As her core body temperature reached 104 degrees, Margaret became disoriented but continued her crucial work of grass measurement. She collapsed face down on the very lawn she had been obsessively monitoring, her measuring tape still clutched in her hand as heat stroke shut down her vital organs. Her body temperature soared to 108 degrees as she lay unconscious on the 3.2-inch grass that had consumed her thoughts for months. Jim discovered Margaret's body when he returned from work at 6 p.m., immediately calling 911 despite their ongoing feud. Paramedics pronounced her dead from heat stroke, with her violation notices scattered around her body like confetti. The HOA board was forced to acknowledge that Margaret had no legal authority to conduct property inspections, and her death led to policy changes requiring board members to work in pairs and avoid extreme weather conditions. It was July 4, 2017, when a man's desperate pursuit of internet fame would turn a backyard celebration into a deadly spectacle. Bryce Harlow, 28, an unemployed construction worker from Bakersfield, California, had spent 6 months creating increasingly dangerous YouTube videos for his channel, which had attracted only 847 subscribers despite his reckless efforts to achieve viral stardom. Bryce's impulsive personality and complete lack of risk assessment had already resulted in 2 broken bones and a concussion from previous failed stunts, but his obsession with professional stuntmen drove him to attempt ever more dangerous feats. His girlfriend, Sarah, had grown increasingly concerned, watching him transform from a hardworking tradesman into someone consumed by the need for online validation. For his 4th of July special, Bryce conceived what he believed would be his breakthrough stunt, jumping his motorcycle over his neighbor's above-ground swimming pool while fireworks exploded overhead. The plan seemed simple in his mind, but his minimal motorcycle experience and tendency to overestimate his abilities created a recipe for disaster that everyone could see except Bryce himself. He spent 3 days constructing a wooden launch ramp using scrap lumber and basic construction tools. His background in construction gave him confidence in building structures, but designing a motorcycle jump ramp required engineering knowledge he didn't possess. The ramp's angle, height, and structural integrity were based on guesswork rather than proper calculations. Sarah pleaded with him to abandon the dangerous project, while his neighbor threatened to call the police. However, his stubborn determination and belief that this would finally bring internet fame made him dismiss all concerns as jealousy from people who didn't understand his vision. The evening of July 4th arrived with perfect weather and neighbors celebrating with traditional fireworks displays. Bryce set up multiple cameras to capture every angle of what he was certain would become his viral masterpiece. His 250 cubic centimeter dirt bike was adequate for trail riding, but hardly professional stunt equipment. At 9:30 p.m., with fireworks booming overhead and neighbors watching in horrified fascination, Bryce revved his motorcycle and approached the homemade ramp at 35 miles per hour. The wooden structure, built without proper engineering, immediately began buckling under the combined weight and force of the motorcycle hitting it at speed. The ramp collapsed completely just as Bryce reached the takeoff point, sending both bike and rider tumbling forward in a chaotic mass of splintering wood, twisted metal, and human flesh. Instead of launching gracefully over the pool, Bryce was thrown from the disintegrating motorcycle directly toward his neighbor's brick barbecue pit. He struck the brick structure headfirst at full speed, causing immediate skull fractures and severe cervical spine damage. The motorcycle landed on top of him, crushing his chest and abdomen while pinning him against the unforgiving masonry. The sickening crash sound silenced the neighborhood celebration, as witnesses realized they had just watched someone die. Neighbors rushed to help, but the damage was catastrophic and immediately apparent. Bryce's labored breathing and blood pooling around his head told the story his cameras would later confirm in horrifying detail. He lost consciousness within 45 seconds and died from traumatic brain injury and massive internal bleeding. Paramedics arrived within 4 minutes but could only confirm what everyone already knew. The entire incident had been captured by his own cameras, creating a disturbing record of how the pursuit of internet fame had cost him everything. It was August 19, 2017, in Austell, Georgia. The summer heat lingered over an amusement park, where crowds filled the park with noise and energy. The rides churned with mechanical rhythm, but beneath the excitement there was an unspoken tension. Later that evening, the park would be remembered for more than roller coasters and laughter. Melissa Daniels was 41, a marketing consultant from Atlanta, known for her blunt manner and impatience. Colleagues described her as sharp and outspoken, quick to point out incompetence as she saw it. She had steady work with small regional businesses and liked to project authority in public. Away from work, amusement parks were one of her indulgences. She followed ride enthusiasts' forums, often boasting she understood how restraints and ride systems worked. Her relationship with risk was one of control. She believed rules applied to others, not to her. Roller coaster rides rely on layered restraint systems, lap bars, shoulder harnesses, and seat belts, checked and locked by attendants before departure. The ride Melissa boarded, a looping steel coaster, used a rigid over-the-shoulder harness with an additional seat belt latch at the base. Operators required both to be secure before dispatch. Despite this, riders sometimes tried to test boundaries, pulling against restraints to prove how much movement was possible. That day, the coaster carried longer waits than usual. Temperatures were high, making crowds restless. Witnesses said Melissa complained aloud about the attendants moving too slowly during loading, mocking their efficiency. When it was her turn, she pulled her restraint down, but several passengers nearby noticed she deliberately pushed the belt aside, insisting she could manage it herself. An attendant gave a quick tug on the shoulder harness, but with a full cue pressing, the check was brief. A warning announcement played, reminding riders to remain secured, but Melissa looked unconcerned. The train climbed its initial hill with the sound of clattering chains. From below, the structure loomed above the park. Riders shouted and braced as the first drop plunged into speed. The train moved smoothly through twists and turns, then approached its first inversion, a tight loop that whipped bodies upside down. Security footage later confirmed Melissa had shifted in her seat, her torso not held as firmly as others. As the train inverted, her shoulders lifted clear of the restraint. The accident unfolded in seconds. Witnesses behind her saw her body rise as if weightless, then slip free. She flailed as she cleared the harness entirely, tumbling upward before gravity pulled her down. In full view of the row behind, she struck a steel support beam with crushing force, the impact audible over the screams. Her body fell through open space and hit the ground near a service path beside the track. The train completed its circuit, riders screaming both from fear of the ride and from what they had just seen. Some were hysterical by the time the cars returned to the station, hands trembling, faces pale. Operators halted boarding immediately while security rushed to the scene. Park medics reached Melissa within minutes, but her injuries were catastrophic. Records later showed she had died on impact, with no chance of survival. Her body was removed under tarps while crowds were quietly ushered away from the area. News spread quickly across the park, but details were scarce until the evening. The coaster was shut down indefinitely for inspection. In the days after, the focus shifted less to mourning and more to the behavior that had led to the fall. Park staff documented her refusal to follow instructions, and investigators noted that the safety systems had not failed. Back in Atlanta, Her workplace acknowledged her absence only briefly. Colleagues who had often found her combative did not organize tributes, and no public memorial was held. It was October 8, 2019, when a freelance videographer's obsession with capturing forbidden aerial footage would lead to a catastrophic encounter with commercial aviation. Narissa Kent, 26, a reckless drone pilot and YouTube content creator, had built her online following by filming illegal aerial footage in restricted airspace, believing that breaking federal aviation rules was the key to viral success. Narissa's rebellious and thrill-seeking personality made her dismissive of authority figures and safety regulations, viewing FAA flight restrictions as personal challenges to overcome. Her YouTube channel had attracted 4,000 subscribers who watched her dangerous flights over military bases and commercial airports. Working part-time editing wedding videos barely covered her expenses, but Narissa invested every spare dollar into high-end drone equipment, convinced that one spectacular aerial video would launch her career as a professional filmmaker. Her apartment was filled with expensive quadcopters and camera equipment, representing months of savings and debt. Rocky Mountain Regional Airport's restricted airspace was heavily monitored due to its massive commercial traffic volume, with sophisticated radar systems and federal agents detecting unauthorized drone operations. The airport handled over 60 million passengers annually, making any interference with aircraft operations a potential mass casualty event. Despite receiving multiple warnings from aviation authorities about her previous illegal flights, Narissa had planned her most dangerous stunt yet, flying her drone directly over active runways during peak evening traffic to capture never-before-seen footage of commercial aircraft takeoffs from extremely close range. At 8:30 p.m., Narissa positioned herself near the airport perimeter fence and launched her drone toward the active runway, where a Boeing 737 was preparing for takeoff with 180 passengers aboard. She flew her drone directly into the flight path at 200 feet altitude, attempting to film the plane's engines from dangerous proximity. The drone was immediately sucked into the Boeing 737's jet engine intake during takeoff, causing catastrophic engine failure that forced the pilots to abort takeoff and declare an emergency. The engine ingestion created a violent explosion of metal fragments and damaged turbine blades, while the aircraft skidded down the runway with sparks flying. Airport security and federal investigators had been monitoring unauthorized radio frequencies and immediately triangulated Narissa's position using detection equipment. Within minutes of the engine strike, federal agents surrounded her location, but she panicked when she realized the severity of what had occurred. Instead of surrendering to authorities, Narissa abandoned her drone controller and ran directly onto the active airport grounds, crossing multiple taxiways in complete darkness, while emergency vehicles rushed toward the disabled aircraft. Her desperate flight took her directly into the path of a ground service vehicle, traveling at 25 miles per hour. The collision was immediate and devastating, with Narissa suffering fatal head and chest injuries as the heavy vehicle struck her at full speed. She was pronounced dead at the scene from massive blunt force trauma, while emergency crews continued working to evacuate passengers from the damaged Boeing 737. The commercial aircraft made a successful emergency landing with no passenger casualties, but the incident exposed vulnerabilities in airport security systems. Federal investigation revealed Narissa's extensive history of illegal flights and multiple previous warnings she had ignored. Her death led to increased penalties for drone violations near airports and mandatory registration systems for commercial drone operators nationwide. It was May 22, 2016. At the London Zoo in Regent's Park, England. The day was mild, the crowd steady, and families lingered at the exhibits. The lion enclosure drew clusters of visitors, children pressing against the rail to glimpse the animals pacing the grassy habitat below. By mid-afternoon, the routine hum of chatter would break under a scene that left witnesses shaken and staff scrambling. Patricia Walker, 56, had taken the train from her home in Watford for what she described to neighbors as a casual Sunday outing. Known among acquaintances for her sharp tongue, conflict for her was routine, asserting control in everyday situations where she felt ignored. She had no real history of risk-taking in outdoor activities, but in public spaces, she frequently pushed against rules and restrictions, dismissing them as unnecessary. The lion exhibit was designed with multiple safety layers. A low rail kept visitors back several feet from a concrete lip, beyond which a dry moat dropped roughly 12 feet into the enclosure. The animals, 3 adult lions, occupied an open savanna space with grass, boulders, and logs. Clear signage warned guests to remain behind the barrier, and staff at the station often reminded anyone who leaned too close. Still, incidents of guests attempting to stretch over the railing for better photos were not uncommon. That afternoon, Patricia grew irritated after a staff member told her to step back. She complained loudly, accusing them of spoiling her visit. Ignoring repeated instructions, she leaned over the barrier, gesturing toward the lions as she mocked their inactivity. Several visitors nearby shifted uncomfortably, one father with a pram moving his children farther down the rail. Despite the warnings and visible signage, Patricia remained fixated, eventually leaning too far forward. Her shoe slipped against the smooth concrete edge, sending her weight past the point of balance. She pitched forward with a sudden cry, flipping over the rail and tumbling into the dry moat. Gasps rippled through the crowd as she landed hard, rolling onto the dirt floor below. For several seconds, the enclosure was silent, the lions pausing at the unexpected intrusion. Then 2 of them charged. The male struck first, clamping powerful jaws onto her shoulder. Patricia screamed, thrashing against the dirt, while a lioness swiped with extended claws, tearing into her arms and torso. Visitors screamed, others shielding children's eyes. Zoo staff responded within moments, deploying air horns and high-pressure hoses. The lions hesitated briefly under the blasts of water, but the male did not release his grip. Patricia's body twisted unnaturally as he pulled, blood streaking across the dirt. Within minutes, her movement slowed, then stopped entirely. Staff escalated efforts, finally forcing the lions back with repeated horns and sustained water streams, long enough to lure them into a holding pen. Emergency personnel entered only after the animals were secured. Patricia was pronounced dead at the scene, her body bearing massive trauma consistent with mauling. Witnesses, still clustered behind the rail, were led away quietly, many visibly shaken. Her relatives avoided questions about the circumstances when interviewed during her funeral. In a press conference, officials emphasized that the victim had disregarded posted rules and staff instructions, underscoring the limits of what safety measures could prevent when warnings were ignored. The zoo reinforced the barriers in the weeks that followed, raising railings and adding additional signage. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.